Welcome back to the channel. Today, it's story time. I want to tell you about the time that I quit my job after just 3 days, after learning 3 critical things. With no backup plan, I was unemployed, but I learned some valuable lessons along the way. I want to share the story here today because I think that you will find it beneficial for your own career journey as well. So let's dive into it. Have you ever started a new job and realized pretty quickly that it wasn't going to be a good fit? Maybe it was the people, maybe it was the fact that in the interview or in those early discussions with the hiring manager or the recruiter, this job didn't quite seem as advertised. Because that's exactly what happened to me in 2018 when I made the bold decision to quit after just 3 days. After learning more about the role, I decided to choose unemployment instead, which was a difficult decision, but ultimately I think it was for the best. So I had finished grad school. I was in a solid role for about a year. I had nice colleagues. I was building my resume. I was in the stage of my career where I knew I had to go through probably a couple stepping stone roles in order to ultimately achieve the dream job that I have now. When new job opportunity came up and I made the tough decision to leave my current job and start this new job. Long story short, the idea of the job was that I was going to be creating programming or programs for children at schools in a school community, right? I'm going to be improving a community by developing programs, coming up with like after school programming for kids, lunch hour programming for students. That sounded great. Let's do it. So I took the job. 1 day goes by, learned some things. 2 days go by, learned some things. 3rd day goes by, I had learned enough and I quit. Here's what I learned. So one thing that I learned about the job is that there was no real room for creativity. So although it was kind of advertised like you were going to be able to develop these programs, like you were going to be able to come up with creative ideas for after school programming to attract kids and people in the community to come have a good time, have somewhere safe to play and whatnot. And I was under the impression that I would be developing these programs. I'd be managing these programs, the budgeting of these programs, staffing up people to lead the programs, etc. But after the first day, I learned pretty quickly that the programs were predetermined, right? They already have programming in place. They had already partnered with different nonprofit organizations to run the programs. And that really this was just sort of overseeing a program that was already very well established, which is different than what was advertised to me. And so what I started thinking was, what would I be able to say after a year of working at this job, right? How would this help my resume? What goes on my resume if not for I developed this program, I created this idea, I managed the budget of this? If I'm not doing any of those 3 things, then really my resume is not getting any better. And that's not really an option for me at this stage in my career because, as I mentioned, I'm trying to climb the ladder. I'm trying to use this as a stepping stone to get to the future job that I want. So I'm very conscious that I need this job to improve my resume, to move the needle so that I can get closer to that ultimate goal. And that's something that I want you to keep in mind as you're working at your current job and as you're thinking about your next job. How does it help you get to ultimately where you want to be? That's critical. The second thing that I learned is that there was going to be no mentorship. I was going to be working very independently, which on its own, super valuable. Always good to be able to say that you can work completely independently, that you can get your work done, that you're professional, that you perform, you're a self-starter, all that stuff. But at this stage in my career, right, I was young. I was looking for mentorship. I wanted somebody who could teach me the ropes, right, in terms of managing programs, managing grants, applying for grants, managing the budgets, etc. And I found out pretty quickly, nope, you're going to be working pretty much by yourself at a school community, not in an office. You're actually going to be working sort of like on location. You work at the school. You don't manage programs for the community, but work in an office. You actually are going to be at that school, which is neat. Sorry, I hit my table, which is neat. But ultimately, at the time of my career, I thought that mentorship and the learning, I wanted to be a sponge, right? I wanted someone else to teach me the ropes. And this job was not going to bring me that. The third thing that I learned is that this was not really aligned with what I had studied in school. I thought that it was going to be more so, but the more that I learned about maybe this had more of a social work kind of lens, where you're working with the parents of the children and you're kind of discussing how the children are doing, as opposed to just focusing on supplying the fun programs. It sounded more like you're expected to build those relationships with members of the community, which is super rewarding and valuable work. And the fellow who was training me, amazing and very passionate about that element of it. From my point of view, less passionate about that, less interested in that. Not because I don't care about that. That sounds great. Super important work. But because, again, wasn't really moving the needle towards where I wanted to go, which is more technical community planning work. So with no room for creativity, no mentorship opportunities, and no real connection to my schooling or to my ultimate goal, I decided to quit after 3 days with no backup plan. I chose unemployment rather than continuing to work. And the reason that I did that was because I viewed it as somewhat of a waste of time. Job hunting is hard. It takes a lot of time to prepare your resume, to make the applications, to fine-tune your cover letter each time, to do some necessary networking on the side. All those can become a full-time job when you're unemployed and you're hustling and you're grinding and you're trying to find that next opportunity. And it would have been difficult for me to start looking right away while trying to do a good job in this new role. So I made the tough decision to quit the job, be unemployed, and focus all of my efforts on finding that next opportunity that did have mentorship opportunities, where I could see myself growing and where visually I can imagine myself sort of building the blocks that are needed to get to my ultimate job that I was pursuing, right? And that's a critical point that I want to point out here. If you're currently at a job and you're not seeing the growth opportunities, you're not seeing it as that stepping stone that's truly moving the needle towards the ultimate goal, I think you should reconsider. Unless it's bringing you towards that North Star, then I want to be cognizant of my time. The reason I'm telling this story is just to encourage you to keep your eye on the prize always, right? If you know you want to be a certain thing in the future, a certain career, a certain job, maybe you want to be the manager at your current job, you have to make sure that everything that you're doing right now is preparing you for that job. Everything you're doing is a new line item on the resume where you can say, look, I did this, and that's why I can have that dream job. That's why I can become the manager. And if you're sitting in a job right now and you don't feel that progression, you don't feel like you're adding line items onto your resume monthly, I think that's an issue. And I think it's correctable, right? You can always change jobs. Obviously, that's easier said than done. And I know that your financial circumstances and individual circumstances will shape the decisions that you make, and that's totally understood. But if you do have some flexibility, right? If you have a bit of a cushion and you're able to become unemployed for a little while so that you can find that dream job, or you're able to just start that job hunt right now while you work this other job, I highly encourage you to do so. If your current job is not serving you and it's not going to get you to where you want to be, I think you need to go find a different job. And I hope that as part of this channel, you'll see I've made a series kind of about choosing a career that's right for you, right? How to be strategic in the pursuit of your dream career. I hope that this is helpful information. It's motivational information. It gives you something to reflect on, right? Where do you want to go? And is what you're doing right now helping you get there? If not, think about what you need to do. Think about your next move. And stay tuned on this channel for more content about earning, saving, and investing. Thanks for watching.